So this week, let me take these off, they make a lot of noise. So this week, we're in Parashat Bo. And this is, again, like last week, an immediate continuation and, events of what's going on. And we were left off in the middle of the 10 plagues. And now we're coming to the end of the Exodus story. We're coming to the end of the plagues. The last 3 plagues are in this parasha. And we're coming to the end of our servitude in Mitzrayim, and we're gonna, as we all know the story, we're gonna be getting out in, with miracles and Kiryat Yam Suf and all that, but we're not quite there yet, right? That's next week. That's next week's parasha Beshalach, right? So this week is when we're on the threshold of that, right? We're right before being able to leave, and we're gonna see. How that all plays out. I want to focus on what I want to focus on is the last plague, the last makat, the makat bechorot, the firstborns, and how that connects to the korban pesach and what that all means to us as God's firstborn nation, as we are called. So we're going to go through all those ideas and hopefully tie this all together. So let's look at the 10th plague for a second. And I want to say before we go in, myself included, right? Like this is something I have to do as preparing in general. When there's these parshiot that are so well known to us, and we know the ending, we know the story. We've been saying this since we're little. We say it, once a year in the parasha. We say it when we do, Pesach and the Haseder. So this is something that's very familiar to us, and that's great. But on the one hand, but a challenge that comes along with something being so familiar to you is that you sort of take the information for granted and you don't look deeper. And there's certain things that if it's the first time, you have to, myself, meaning we have to look at these stories with a open eye and say, what if I was hearing the story for the first time? What questions would I have? Why would this seem weird? Things that we would take for granted because we know the story and we know how it's going to end might not seem so given when we look at it from that perspective. So I want to sort of challenge all of us to look at every story in Torah like that. Obviously, always try to see what can you take out of this, and not just take the story for granted. And especially stories like this that are so well known and so famous. So let's look at Makat Bechorot, the last plague, in that perspective, hopefully, and we'll hopefully gain some insight from that. So, we sort of just accept this is the 10th plague, this is what happens, great, we leave Egypt, but what's really going on here? And I think if we look, we see that the 10th plague, here, I'm going to share the screen a second, hold on, if anyone cares to look at the screen. Hold on, I want to what's it called? Make it bigger. Slideshow. There we go. Okay. So this plague is different than the other plagues in a couple ways. So the first way I want to point out is that this plague was set out from the get-go. This plague was told to Moshe to tell to Paro, obviously, right at the beginning before he was sent, like on his first time he was being sent. And God tells him, Hashem tells him, V'amarta el Paro, tell Paro, Ko amar Hashem b'ni b'chori Israel, tell Paro, I am God, Israel are my bechor, my oldest child, we'll talk about that term bechor in a minute. We know it means oldest child, but we're going to talk about what it means much more than that, and especially what it means in terms of a nation. How is a nation a bechor? That we'll get into. V'omar elecha, and tell him, tell Paro, shalach et beni v'yavdeni, let my people go so they can worship me. And if you don't let them go, I will kill your son, your bechor. So I want to take a second and look at this for a second. First of all, what does this mean that we're God's firstborn nation? What does that mean practically? What is that idea? And is this a tit for tat type of thing? Like, oh, you don't let them go, I'm gonna get your firstborn? Or is this vengeance? Like what is this exactly? What is the goal here of Makat Bechorot? Is it just God's an angry God, or is there more to it? And we'll see there's more to it. And another thing I want is why was it necessary to start essentially the whole Exodus story with this warning? Why, if this was so significant, why didn't he just do Makat Bechorot and that's it? Why do we need all the other ones, right? All these questions we're gonna hopefully touch upon as we go. So in addition, we see that there was an interesting, another unique facet of the Makat Bechorot was that Bnei Israel had to take part in something in order to be protected from Makat Bechorot. And in the other plagues, just by virtue of them being Israel, they were protected. Like in Makat Dam, their water wasn't blood. The para didn't fall on them. All these things. Their sheep, their cattle didn't die. All these things. So here we see they have to be an active participant in the Makat. So let's talk about that for a second. What happened? Again, this is something we know, but we don't necessarily think of it this way. That when Hashem tells Bnei Israel, tells Moshe that there's going to be Makat Bechorot, he also simultaneously tells him to tell Bnei Israel to get ready and prepare the Pesach sacrifice. So what happens while this is all going on? We're doing Korban Pesach, and what's going on? We take the sheep, right? The why can't I talk? The sheep, yeah, and we slaughter the sheep. We have to roast it, right? And we have to take the blood and put the blood on the inside of the doorpost, right? Not on the outside, on the inside, and we cannot leave the house till morning. And we must be in there the whole night while the Makat Bechorot is going on. We're in our houses. So this is something very interesting. We obviously, the question is not, it's very obvious that God doesn't need a sign to tell him who Israel is, right? This is a very famous thing we say. This is for us. It's on the inside of the door. But what does that mean? It's for us. What is really going on here? So if we see what is this whole idea remind, and another thing before I go on, and they have to be ready. Here, I'll just read a little bit if anyone wants to get psukim. You have to be chagurim, you have to be ready to go, right? You have to be ready at a minute's notice to go. And while you're ready and doing the Korban Pesach, I will be killing the Bechorot of Mitzrayim. Then here it says, this is going to be a sign that you are there. And when the dam is there, I'll pasach, right, will go over you, and I will not kill your Bechor like I have been doing to the rest of Mitzrayim. So what is this a little bit reminiscent of or hinting of? The idea of being stuck inside, the idea of not being able to go out, but needing to be ready at a minute's notice. This idea of blood surrounding the entrance, being able to be let free only the morning, only after all the drama. And I want to argue that this is, by the way, I got a lot of these ideas from Rabbi Foreman, and I took my own spin on it, but a lot of it, give credit where credit's due. I took a lot of these different points from different shiurim that he gave. So yeah, so it's creating almost a birth, right, so to speak, that the house is the womb. You're in the womb, right? You cannot leave, but you have to be ready to leave, right? Like you have to be ready that this could happen at any moment, right? Any parents that had, in the 9th month when you're waiting, you always have your bag packed, you're ready at any moment. When could this happen, right? And then they go through a doorpost of blood as if they're, being born. So this is essentially mirroring childbirth, mirroring the birth of a nation. And we developed physically as a nation in Mitzrayim. We multiplied and multiplied. We talked about that in the first two parashiyot, Shemot and Vayera. But here, this is when we're spiritually committing to becoming God's nations and being in process with God. So how? The plagues were showing one by one how God is in control over all aspects of nature and of the world, right? Unlike the Egyptians who believed in multiple gods, right, controlling different processes in nature, we believe in one God that controls all of it, right, and that rules all of it. And we see, just to hint at it, we could go through all the plagues. That's not really what I want to do right now, but it is interesting to go through that. We saw that with Dam, he hit the Nile, which was one of their gods. We see with Barad, he took hail, which is water, right, and put fire within it and made water and fire as one, right? Not the water god and the fire god, but sort of showed them there's only one. And here with Makat Bechorot, we see the ultimate was that they viewed themselves as gods, right? They viewed themselves as gods, especially Paro did, right? And here, when we're doing Korban Pesach, the sheep was a god of the Mitzrayim, and we're committing. Where like it was a very big thing for Bnei Yisrael to slaughter a sheep and do a sacrifice of the Mitzri god. It was really spitting in their face and showing them, this is not a god. We don't believe in this. We believe in Hashem. So not only that, but how does this whole process take place, right? We have to make sure when we're doing the Korban Pesach, we have to make sure to have to do it in groups and to make sure everyone has the right amount for them. Here, this is whatever I just wrote psukim here about the dam on the makov, and here it has to be the bet avot, right? We have to have enough for each person in the family, but not too much. So you have to plan who you're going to be having this meal with. And as we see, you're sort of stuck in the house, so you can't be like, oh, let's go get so and so from next door to come join us. No, we have to have this all planned from the beginning, who you're going to do this with. And it's almost like, I mean, it's a crude analogy, but it's almost just making me think right now. I didn't even think to say this, but it's almost making me think of like when you know, in the beginning of all this, when we had to do, I mean, here in Israel, it was very, very strict when they really were putting you in full on quarantine, and we couldn't go 100 meters from our house. It was insanity. And it was like, oh, well, I had friends that literally said, I'm going to go do quarantine by my parents or by my in-laws or by my sister, whatever, to be together with the family so that they could support each other and help each other through quarantine. So, I mean, I don't know, just made me think of that when I was talking. So I just put that out there. Still very traumatized by that, obviously. Anyway, so why is this significant? That we have to eat this Korban Pesach with a unit, with a familial unit, with a among people that we care about and we're united with. So I think this is the remedy and the showing that we're committing to ourselves as a nation, as a family, as a united front, as opposed to all the issues that we saw that were happening through Sefer Bereshit with Cain and Hevel, with Yaakov and Esav, with Yosef and his brothers, all these issues within the family that ended up essentially with Yosef and his brothers getting us sent down to Egypt in the first place, right? That's how we got there, was through this fight, through this challenge with our brother, right? With our brothers, right? With our family. And I think that this is showing us, in order to be birthed, to be created as a nation, that as God's nation, we have to be united, be born as in unity, and seeing outside yourself and seeing how am I going to think of the collective, right? And not only of myself. And I think that by doing it in this way, it's sort of like the antidote to everything that we went through and all the drama, and sort of saying, we're going to start fresh. We're going to be united. You're all chosen. You're all my nation, and we're all going to be committed in this mission. So then now I want to go back to the question we touched upon in the beginning. What does it mean to be God's firstborn nation? And why is it important to be God's firstborn nation? So I think what we see is that I want to talk a little bit about the idea of birth order and what it means to be a bechor, right, a firstborn. And obviously this doesn't need to be biologically in a way, even though it's something interesting that, well, I'll talk about that and then we'll go back. I found there's a lot of psychology that talks about birth order and how birth order affects you and your development. And I found this chart. It's a little very simplified, but I thought it would just help, explain and speed things along instead of really going to the whole theory. But feel free to look at it, to look up, birth order in psychology and birth order in personality. There's what was his Adler. Adler was one of the psychologists that really developed this. Was one of he was a contemporary of Freud, and he really developed this theory, or started to develop this theory. There's been more, obviously, but I want to look at this idea in psychology of what a firstborn is. So here, if you look, anyone looking at the chart, it has a column for first, middle, last, and only child. So we'll focus obviously on the firstborn right now. So the firstborns are, no, this is obviously has exceptions. This is not a hard rule, but it's, as someone who's a firstborn, I relate to this. They're natural leaders, they're high achievers, they're organized, they're on time, they are know-it-all, they are bossy, they are responsible and adult pleasers and obey the rules. And I'm going to also add probably very self-focused. We actually have this joke in my family that me and my father are both the firstborn, that sometimes when we get so caught up in something, it's like firstborn, and I see that with a lot of children, a lot of people. Like, I don't know, I find this birth order very telling, and I'm not going to go into this now because it's not so relevant, but also if you look at middle, last, see what you relate to. But anyway, the point I'm making is the firstborn, what is interesting about a firstborn is, what I want to focus on is, they have, most of the time, they have an affinity for leading. They're very connected to adults, because they're the bridge between the adult, the two generations. They're the bridge between the adults and the children, because essentially, if we think about it, if you think about children, anyone, whether it be your childhood or your children's childhood, right? However close in age your children are, the oldest child will always spend more time with adults than all the other children will, right? That just by mere time and fact. So because of that, there's this level there's this facet in the oldest child that has this ability to sort of bridge those two levels of the parents and the child. And for right or for wrong, I think, and it's something to work on as parents, is a lot of times parents will put extra responsibility on the firstborn, or expect more from the firstborn. And I even see that with myself. Like, I see certain things that I think about when my oldest daughter was my son's age, and now I'm like, oh wait, but when she was that age, I would expect her to already be doing X, Y, and Z by herself, and I'm still helping him, or I'm still like babying him. We sort of push them a little more, I think, than the younger children. And especially the youngest of multiple children. So I think this is interesting because the aspect of leadership and adult pleaser and understanding adults and being influential and charismatic to the other children in the family is very important. So if we think about it, for example, like if your parents would lecture you about something and say, oh, make sure that you always help and don't lie, and you'll be like, okay, right? But if you see, like, you'll expect that from the parents, right? Your parents are going to tell you to do good things and not do the wrong thing. But if you see that your older sibling is actually doing these things, or is on board with that, then it also motivates you to be on board also. That they're an example to you of someone who's not an adult, but someone that you still look up to and could relate to on a different level, that you'll be able to do. So the Bnei Israel's role as a firstborn nation is that they're the ones that are supposed to be the Or Lagoyim, right? They're taking the parent, in this case God, right, and they're bringing His will and His morals and His rules, right, into this world by modeling it for the other nations. And this isn't to mean, right, as the same way the parents love all their children. It doesn't mean that God hates the other nations or has something wrong with other nations, but where we have the responsibility to spread His message and influence the other nations on for the better. And I think this is going to help us answer the question of, why was this plague told from the get-go, and is it really a tit for tat type of thing? And I think no, because why? It was so significant because if we realize, right, if Egypt is a culture of injustice, right? They're enslaving Bnei Israel. They're a culture of might makes right, and I'm going to do what I want, and I'm going to subjugate these people. I'm going to kill their not firstborn, their male children. I'm going to do all these bad things to them, and by God doing this makat bechorot and killing their firstborn, he's literally burning the bridge from the evil that is treating his nation to the next generation, and not letting it perpetuate, and saying that all this injustice, all this evil that you did is not going to be able to continue. And even more than that, if you want to talk about relationship between God and us, because God is saying is showing Bnei Israel here, who in the beginning they were so distraught, they could not believe that when Moshe came to them, they didn't believe him because of how distraught they were and how hard Paro was working them. And here he's showing, look, I was watching you and cared about you the whole time. I am giving justice to your subjugator, your abuser, the person that did you wrong, and I am giving you justice. I am giving them what they deserve, and I am giving you your freedom and your ability to get out of this, right? We spoke about this last week, about the idea of Geulah and redeeming and why that's so significant. And it's not that we could just take out, we have to change the narrative and change from victim, literally from being a victim to a free person. And we weren't glossed over or forgotten. And this gives us as a confidence as a nation that that not only are we physically getting free, but God is really believing in us to transmit and continue this mission. And after all this, right, this big makat bechorot and the korban pesach and the blood and everything, all that, you would think that automatically the next scene would be Kriyat Yam Suf, right? We're getting out. And many people would think that, yeah, isn't that the next thing that happens? But a lot of, all the movies that were made, Ten Commandments, Prince of Egypt, all those movies, they don't talk about the next thing that we're going to talk about. And the reason is that it's so exciting. There's not so dramatic, right? It's a little bit seems out of place, but we'll see why it's not. But here we see that after this whole thing, we start to have the laws of Pidyon Bechorot, of people and animal, right? The redeeming of the firstborn of animals and people. So like, why is this here? What is going on? We're in this whole dramatic, night of Makat Bechorot, night of Korban Pesach. And now all of a sudden, oh, by the way, when you get to Israel, you have to do these laws of Bechorot, of Pidyon Bechorot and animals. Like, what? It just doesn't seem like, okay, like, why is this here? And as we talked about before, in the idea of Bechor, of the child, I want to look at it for a second as the parent, from the parent's perspective. So when someone becomes a parent, right, especially for the first time, right, when you have your first child, your Bechor, you literally the closest you can be to God, because you literally create life. Like when you think of it like that, I mean, I don't know, it's really a miracle, right? Like you create this life. And the Gemara talks about how there's three in creation. There's the mother, the father, and God, and literally putting those three on the same level of creation. We're partners, so to speak, in creating this life, which is a big responsibility, right? Obviously, if you think about it. But on the other hand, it could give you, as the parent, this this false sense, or getting caught up in your own greatness and forgetting that God is a big part of this, right? And not just thinking about yourself. So when you get to that point and you have your first child, don't forget God. Don't forget God's place in it. And like we spoke about last week, remember, we are God-alike, but we are not God, right? We have this amazing creative potential, but we're not God, right? He's still God. He's still above us. He still creates, he's still the ultimate creator and ruler, and we are still his nation and not him, right? So this leads all the way back to Gan Eden, and how in the beginning, right, it was Adam, Chava, and God, and they were all supposed to be on the same path, right? Meaning God was the leader, but Adam and Chava were supposed to be so close to God that they were, in a way, very, like, not equal, but very close to equal, right? As close as a human could be to equal. And then by them eating from Tzadad and saying, no, I want to run it my way, the whole distance came out, and we had to be expelled from Gan Eden, right? So essentially, that the child that that creates this, feeling of I am the creator, in the parents, is responsible to making them realize that God is the ultimate creator by making them do this pidyon process. And yeah, just a personal quick story, but like just for myself, I remember actually it wasn't my first daughter, it was my first child, my second child, but it was just, I remember when I was giving birth to him, it was such it was a precipitous labor. It was in very, very quick. And I remember feeling in every inch of my body that I'm like, wow, this is what my body was made for. I am like, and it took me a minute to be like, once I was like, this is what I am meant to be doing right now. And this is what God has set out for me to be birthing this baby. Like, it just was this feeling of such intense control and such intense gratefulness, right? Of being able to go through this right now. And I think that, I don't know, maybe other people also feel this way, but I really related to that idea of not getting too caught up in that and being grateful and being connected to God and not thinking, wow, look, it's all me. And so basically, in a very, very physical way, when God is doing Makat Bechorot now, and then telling us to do Pidyon Bechorot, he's saying, I am cutting off the ability for the Mitzvim to continue to do what they're doing. But you, when you are in the land and you are settled and you are free and you are my nation, you need to not forget the role and responsibility that you have as creative people and bringing life into this world, and especially as the Bechor, you have to always do Pidyon Bechor. So let's look at and one last mitzvah that seems a little bit out of place, but I'll show you, I hopefully will show you that it's not, is during this whole thing, we have the mitzvah of Chodesh Lazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, that Nisan is going to be the first month. Okay, like, first, why now? What is the significance of this? Why is this a mitzvah that's now? And why do we care, right? But back again, is this month we have to remember, because it's our birthday. It's our birthday as a nation. Nisan it's not about, we say on Rosh Hashanah, right? Hayom Harat Olam, right? That the world was created during Rosh Hashanah. But here we were created, and we have to remember that. And that's why Nisan is we start from Nisan, and we as a nation, we connect from Nisan. And that's also something to know, is that in this process, this is about the birth of a nation, right? We're very premature, right? We're still, we have to go, I mentioned this last week, I think we have to go through the whole process of the midbad and getting into the audits and building ourselves, maturing as a nation. That's all going to come, but this is the beginning of it, the start, the seed, the start that's starting it. And is that this plague is showing that not only is God master over the world, but it's showing he is a God of justice, and he doesn't let his creations suffer unjustly, and he will give, due to, what those that have wronged them, and give compassion. And even if we don't see it immediately, like, unfortunately, this was a very long time, but justice, so to speak, will be served, and is served in this case, in the Makat Bechorah. And I want to look at one last thing that another thing that we sort of take for granted, but all this we commemorate in the holiday of Pesach, right? Right. This is all the story and the commemoration of Chag Pesach. And why do we name this holiday Pesach, right? We sort of take it for granted. Oh, because God passed over us on the clay, right? Obviously, but not obviously, because this was only one event within 10 plagues that were going on. So why did we pick this event? Why don't we pick another event in the plagues? Why don't we do something else, right? To us, it seems silly. Like, of course we picked this, but why? And I think the answer is that this is showing us is that now this whole process through the whole process of plagues, and the whole education was not only to teach, it was twofold. It was to teach the Egyptians that you are not the leader and creator and the God, that Hashem is the one leader and creator, but it is also showing that because I am creator and because I am the ruler, I choose to have Israel as my nation. as my partners in all this, as my order going into the other nations. And it's a big responsibility and it's not easy because a lot of times, we as an oldest, I could say this, right? And not in a bad way, but like, oh, you're the oldest, so you have your driver's license first. So you have to go pick up your brother, or you have to go do, errand for your parents, or you have to stay home and babysit instead of going out with your friends because you're right. All these things that the oldest has a responsibility that sometimes we'll roll our eyes at. And those are like, I'm just saying, just tried examples. But if we think about it in terms of really being a model and showing the rest of the family and aka here the rest of the world, the rest of it is to really be a light upon them. That's not a simple task. And I think that that's why this is, like I said before, this is the birth of the nation, and we're still maturing till now. We're still learning how to do that properly till now. It's a constant work that we have to work on. So I hope that we all continue to be able to have the clarity and responsibility to do that, and hopefully really bring the ultimate light into the world. And we have Mashiach and a nation where it says that the other nations will look and say, "Wow, is am hacham ben avon," right? That we really are living in the right way, and instead of the nations, you know, hating on us and saying all these anti-Semitic things about us and being anti what we do and we're wrong and we're this and we're that, to hopefully switch the narrative. And we switch the narrative by working on ourselves because we can't change anyone else besides ourselves. So I really wish us all luck because it was not an easy work. We're going to be going on hiatus after this class. So thank you for coming along. And look out on the SCA, Instagram, emails, updates, because hopefully we'll be starting again in February. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you.